expectations, and of course, all the problems, complications were beset when Vietnam War went on accelerating to a point of no return. 1960s was the age of dissent, protest, and critical analysis, and of course, people were disillusioned, and there was an evidence that authoritarianism, the power of the American was slipping, the confidence was slipping, and American leadership was totally failed because the American experience, American cultural values have simply disappeared. And of course, it was taken by Ken Kesey and the gang. I would rather call them the merry pranksters of the Parry Lane, who really brought about the cultural revolution in America. And in fact, the widespread political activism spread through all the American universities. Particularly in that context, I would say that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a campus novel, and was a terrible blot on the American consciousness was when the military police have shot 4 students dead at the campus of Kent University, which led to widespread riots all over the United States. And I must say that the 60s was the age of change, and I must say topically radical and structurally very innovative. And we have at that point of time the great novel to have hit on this literary scene. And what kind of novels we have? We have Joseph Heller, Catch-22, Kurt Vonnegut, you have Slaughterhouse-Five. Neil Young, another young artist, came from nowhere and captured the attention of the American readers. And of course, who can forget Allen Ginsberg with his sensual, meticulously structured poetry and captured the imagination of most Americans. Another man to have hit the American scene was Frank O'Hara. Then we can't forget the name of Donald Bottam. And of course, it's the age of counterculture heroes, Bob Dylan. Then you have Allen Ginsberg. And of course, you have a great singer, Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday. And how can we forget the name of the great magician, the jazzman, Charlie Parker? Well, this is important that we think about it. And of course, 60s is known for the great beat movement. And it's a hipster cult that started. And Beatles from the United Kingdom, from nowhere, came down to America in early 60s and brought about a radical change in pop art and pop music. And of course, 60s was besieged with the fear of the atom bomb, Cold War. Then Kesey became a kind of a mass religious leader, and people visiting his home in Oregon. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, published in 1962, is all about Ken Kesey's experiences at a mental asylum at Menlo Park. What we have to think about at this point of time, that Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest speaks a lot about the Bohemian tradition that became a very popular movement indeed. And when I saw the film, you see the Bohemian elements in the name of the hero, Randall Patrick McMurphy, who hits the mental asylum like a lightning and thunder from nowhere. This is the one scene that we have this great actor playing out the role, and really showed the gutsy, the sensuous, the power of his imagination, his muscular body, the kind of rowdyism and the kind of a split-second vision that it exists. But again, I talked about this film to my good friend several times, and my friend Pixie used to really say that this is one of the best narrative examples of a film that captured the attention of many cinematic design that the movie talks about. Being a movie buff, I always admired this gutsy performance by this great hero who came from Norway and got the Best Actor award for that film. In fact, what I talk about is Malcolm Cowley talks about the left bank in Paris, which was very popularized by Ernest Hemingway, Aldous Huxley, T.S. Eliot, and many others. But the replica of that scenario has been created when we have this beautiful exotic places in Oregon and all over America. The LSD psychedelic drug movement became very popular. And of course, body painting, exotic costumes, sexual mayhem, freakouts, psychiatry, and psychoticism, Eastern, mysticism, marijuana became the tools for the great counterculture movement, which became extremely popular during the time. But I must say in one grasp, the magic of this great novel, like Magic Johnson, one of the greatest sportsman champions of the United States, who talks about, and rather the book covers so many aspects in one book you find out. We talk about psychology, psychiatry, medicine, literature, human relations, drama, art, cosmology, religion, sociology, American culture, folk culture, blah, blah. You name it, you have it, everything under the sun. The book is an exposition of religion, sociology, and of course you have a tragedy, pathos, humor, and it is, rightly said, one of the greatest campus novels to have emanated from the ruckus-stricken bosom of America. And you go the, I must say, Kirk Douglas, one of the greatest giants on the silver screen and my favorite actor for all times. He bought the movie long time ago for $18,000, and his son, Michael Douglas, took the movie rights and made it into a grand film, which went on to fetch $50 million. What a fortune. But Kesey never asked more money for that. And in fact, I must say, the novel has one of the most interesting features. Number one, exposition, complication, climax, and falling action. And you have all these issues coming up with such rapid and tremendous ease and juxtaposition of all these issues, countering and bordering on that particular situational crisis that deepens page after page. When the novel appeared in 1962, many people wondered whether Kesey is a one-novel wonder. It is not. 7 million copies were sold out, which is a record in American fictional history. And I must say that many young people found a kind of a regenerative, a resourceful reinforcement for the novel, for their bitter resentment against the authoritarian American government, which has been in use for several years for racial discrimination and again anti-apartheid policy, which they were subjecting many citizens, and anti-Semitism became very popular. America is no longer the idyllic or the Garden of Eden to live. People were frustrated. Mostly this novel appealed to the young people below 20 or below 25 years. What the people in America has got one film, Pursuit of Happiness. Will Smith acted in the film. It talks about pursuit of spontaneous sensual life. Adults received confirmation for their uneasy, or rather their own existence was under threat, and their lives were rather more chipped off, and people felt totally alienated, and morality and law and the institutional authority had crushed the freedom, the will of the people, and the popular view of the people has been trampled across. The old and the incapacitated felt that the pervasive sense of victimization was on the cards, and in fact, they were looking out for some kind of a champion to liberate them from slavery. And here comes one of the greatest living characters of all time, Mac Murphy, the hero of for whom I'm sorry, Ken Kesey's One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest. And I must say that I strongly recommend you should see this film, because the actor who played in that role is one of the greatest actors of all time, and he portrayed that role with that kind of finesse and efficiency. What I like about this novel is that Kesey had pictured mental ward as a wasteland, Nurse Ratched as Madame Sosostris, who represents the wasteland elements of mechanization. She represents the heartless efficiency, fear, guilt, helplessness, sterility, and Randall Patrick Murphy comes on the scene like a Grail knight, conquers Big Nurse temper, cures Chief Bromden, who's narrating the novel, the American Indian, the pathetic portrayal of the American Indian as a man completely being thrown away from the mainstream of American life. Kesey is trying to talk about the colored people, the American Indians, and the Jews, and so many oppressed people, the minorities in America, almost wilting under the pressure of the oppressive institution called it is individual versus the forces of combined, and the ailing Fisher-Knight. I mean, McMurphy restores life in the wasteland, giving men confidence, laughter, love, self-respect. Asylum as a chapel perilous upside down, and it makes patients to come under the shadow of the red rock. And I must say, the characterization of McMurphy is so dexterously, so poignantly been brought out. He's a 35-year-old man, not married. He's a wanderer, jailbird, drawling gambler, a con man, escapes from Korean camp, communist camp, enters the asylum, the thundering, "Who is the Bill Goose Looney here?" The thunderous, magnificent voice of this man really epitomizes the heroic proportion to the giant proportion that this man raises, a towering figure among all the important men who were languishing in the desperate dungeon of that mental asylum. The second most interesting confrontation, which I said as a part of the novel's exposition, is TV confrontation. All the mental asylum, those who were in the mental asylum, wanted to see the World Series sport. And the nurse Ratched, the head of the combine, says, "Nothing doing. You don't deserve it. Will you keep quiet, shut up, and get back into your rooms?" And she thunders. They're mighty scared about her. It's McMurphy who tries to talk to them, and he's a very cunning and a crafty man, and tries to infuse confidence in them. And the nurse says, Big Nurse says, "Let us put it to vote." He takes all of them into confidence. The win and the TV series, World Series, is shown to them. First big victory for McMurphy for defeating Miss Nurse Ratched at her own game. I must say, what is important to understand, McMurphy plays the role of a great pretender, and resistance and rebellion are the two badges of courage. I must say that 60s was an age of affluence and commands a rather spiritually impoverished age. McMurphy is a disruptionist, revolts against The big nurse authority smears her window with color, challenges her voting disruption, the ward's routine, and and then he tries to please the inmates, and by weakening nurses' authority, he strengthens the inmates and the power to understand, to be their own man, to take their own decisions, and rather leadership and rising consciousness of the people, the inmates, as the cross section of the American society. The inmates of the mental asylum are the cross section of the American society. Each and every American is put to such terrible situation, confrontation attitude. The white policeman versus the black people. And recently we've heard that how the white man taking that aggressive posture has murdered the black man on the streets of Minneapolis. And trouble is brewing up still in Minneapolis today. This is what Ken Kesey talks about. Racial discrimination has no place in a civilized modern society. And of course, laughter as a weapon is a kind of a proletarian revolution of mind that I'm talking about. Kesey was the first man who went against the mainstream and talks about the proletarian cultural power rests with the people. Pop art, music, jazz, the popular means by which you could beat the American government, the power of the authority, and break it into smithereens. And then, of course, transforming the life of inmates who become lifeless emotionally, and this broken spirit to revive them, resurrect them, give them the opportunity to speak, to have the guts to fight on. And this fight, he has to pick up the gauntlet and take the fight to the enemy camp. That's what the message the novel is giving to the American people. Fight back, fight on, never give up. Don't you ever give in. These are the things that 1960s counter revolution, the great movement that started. And that's why I say looniness, madness is a part of the mechanics of defiance. This is what I've been talking about. Now, this is a very great classic text, I must say, and embodies a modern form of long-standing tension in American life and literature between individual and society, between optimism and pessimism. Novel talks about what he call affirms heroism in the face of universal absurdity. And what catch 22 Joseph Heller is talking about, not heroism to fight and be an undefeated hero. It is heroism where you would live to fight another day, but don't risk your life. You're living in an absurd world which is meaningless, helpless. People are absolutely frustrated. There's a kind of a crisis growing in the American society. The classic example is another great film which I saw recently, American Women. I request my friends to see this movie. It talks about marriage as an institution does not exist. Marriage is an absolute obliterated institution. Broken marriages. Every seventh man in America is a divorcee. Can you imagine the mental instability? The American institutionalized marriage as an institution has ended in total bankruptcy. And when Mac Murphy says, what the hell are you talking all about? Get the hell out of my sight! This is what every American is frustrated, standing at the crossroad of life with a question mark on his face. And of course, it is a question of heroism which, out of alienation, the hero comes out and fighting all the destructive forces. But I must say, the place back, how beautifully Kesey has placed his hero in the text, the mental war between of the combined and the beginners on the one side, they are pressed, rule, and the rank of the individual. The inmates have no option but to submit between mass society and the norms of conformity to the individual, and his impulses for freedom between pessimism and human weakness and optimism and human strength. The novel is talking all about these important features which have become some of the great classic examples: American way of life, the American experience, the American great culture that it talks about. Cuckoo's Nest is a novel of the people as machines, beginners, the combined, slaves as masters, the aids of beginners, women as men, beginners, men as women, Harding, Billy Babbitt, helpless. They never felt that they are men. They were impotent, sick. The morale gone down on the oblivion. The road not taken. You can't experiment. You can't tell sense to these people. And what McMurphy, like Magic Johnson, tells them to do, he said, just do it. Forget the danger. It's not taking the risk. Be a man and do your job. Move. Get the hell out of here. Do your job. And of course you have, McMurphy is the Iran who has to defeat the Alzon, the imposter, the self-deceived fool, and give life of laughter. And to the only surviving chief, the great American Indian, almost shrunk of his authentic self, looking nowhere. Throughout the novel, Bromden is pretending to be deaf and mute, 6 foot 8 inches, a very powerful man. His father married the American Indian. His father married an American woman, and she had cocooned him, cuckolded him, made him lose all his manliness, loss of everything. It's like aggrandizement of the American state, knocking away huge chunks of land which belong to the Native American Indian, being driven out into the reservations. That is a pathetic plight. And McMurphy, the narrator of the story, he's a man pretending to be mute and deaf. He is not mute and deaf. He's like a spy, listening to everybody. He's struck with a sense of guilt and fear. It's McMurphy who gives him courage, who keeps on by holding his hand, passing on this self-ravaging sense of, confidence, authenticity, and heroism. And he says, it's time that you act, but McMurphy doesn't believe him. He's still suspicious. But what he likes about is McMurphy's open defiance. And slowly McMurphy is able to transform him. And then McMurphy is preparing him for the eventual big fight that's about to take. And then, this is what the novel is all about. And what I must say at this juncture is, in totality of the context, is, if you look at the structure of the novel divided into 4 sections, the exposition, complication, climax, falling action, resolution pattern, like no other traditional fiction, discovery and reversal, and central devices, which add to the central thematic design and structure of the novel. And in part, you have the freedom versus repression theme, which is very popular, and McMurphy goes from a con man to a hero, a messiah, trying to give new sense of identity, preparing McMurphy into an eventual final fight, a big fight that would take place. Absurdity of life, to face absurdities of life with tremendous courage of conviction. And I must say that this novel epitomizes some of the finer virtues that he talks about. The The American state can initiate at what Kesey talks about. He's talking about in 1962, how true it is today. The American government, the state promoting social tyranny, ideological tyranny, and at the same time, you know, consciousness of every man has been belittled and it's been totally dissipated. Psychological tyranny is one that captivates you and destroys you completely. And therefore, the novel depicts about the shrinkage of the authentic self. And it is, trying to bring about the story of liberation of men who have been long withdrawn into their cuckoo's nest, or rather long withdrawn into their shell, into the cocoon. And of course, mentally disturbed wards, helpless as they are. And then, of course, Chief Robden comes in there to bring in. And the government refuses to let the American Indian live a natural way of life. It simulates schizophrenia, pretending neither to hear or talk. Bromden defines the symbolic meaning of mental hospital, and Nurse Ratched how she tries to use her apparatus to destroy the individual and breaking them down to pieces. And this is again put the individual, into the tight situation. And combined cannot tolerate uniqueness. The American government cannot see any individual trying to disturb its state or its mechanism or its apparatus. Anyone who goes again, people are sent against that person to take out everything, including your solitary confinement, into everything that you operate and go about, including your credit cards. Everything of you is being brought out onto the map, and by one they simply decimate you, demolish you completely. These men must be liberated from their cringing refusal to be aware. And Bromden explained that combined main device for controlling the patients is fog. Throughout the mental asylum, fog machines are kept. Fog comes out of those pipes, and they are in a state of, reclusiveness, totally in a state of, fantasia, unconscious. They don't know what's happening around. The thick fog enveloping them. Their consciousness is total drowsiness. They can't feel, they can't see, they can't visualize anything. Then identity is totally blurred. And then, of course, you have everything happening in a rapid context. And McMurphy teaches these men to be less afraid, forcing them to assert themselves. And rather, there is no more fog. It is your fantasy. Get out of this. Nothing. It's a make-believe thing. Nothing exists. There's no fog. You be your own self. McMurphy gives them strength to come from every person to come out of his own shell and have the resource of inner strength. And that strength comes from nature. And of course, one of the most beautiful scenes in the novel define the authority of big nerds, that the hero takes all the mental ward patients on a great picnic to the sea, and Miss Nurse warns him that if anything happens, if there is a mishap, you will be held responsible. If anyone dies in swimming and there is an accident that takes place, you will be solely responsible for this tragedy. And the trip turns out to be what Miss Ratched anticipated. But though out on the open sea, challenged by the fish and the elements of the nature, the men are provided with opportunities to engage in a very honest struggle. Nature gives them ample opportunity. But the like combined, it seeks to imprison. The combined invites struggle to survive. But struggle is a creative act of rebellion which men define themselves by following the precepts of the great preceptor McMurphy. Billy Babbitt is a one interesting character who is throughout his life being dominated by his mother. He can't spend even 2 minutes with his girlfriend. Several of his girlfriends abandoned him because he's a coward. His mother keeps on tapping him. And then he's disgust, a mental model completely broken. And here, on the fishing expedition, all these people rediscover the magic of their self. McMurphy helps them. And then, of course, he brings them back into the asylum with liquor, bottles, prostitutes, defying the discipline of the mental hospital. In the night, there is a sexual mayhem. Everybody is dead drunk. In the early morning, when the big nurse, the representative of the combine comes, she finds Billy Babbitt almost naked with a prostitute, Sandra. And she's just frightened, saying, I'm going to disclose this to your mother. He's so panicked. And out of that panic situation, he commits suicide. This is the situation. McMurphy is upset with all the indoctrination, with all the power and the strength that was trying to restore and resurrect in them. With the failure that this man committed, he couldn't stand, he couldn't take it. And that's what nobody is invincible, but McMurphy told them, you can fight back, slowly recover. This is your dream. You're fit. You're a masculine. You have your own way of life. Don't try to degrade yourself. Hold my hand. McMurphy, with all the injury marks, tattoos, with his already smeared nose, he looks like one of those big bulldog fighters on New York streets. He's a champion. He infuses a kind of a renewed vigor and vitality into the hands of the people so that they can fight back. But then Billy collapses and he commits suicide, and that's one of the most tragic events portrayed in the novel. McMurphy tries to play the role of God. And of course, he's a kind of a God, the last act of creativity, the final act of rebellion. Deliberately, he tries to overdo, singing dirty songs in the asylum, breaking the glass structure of Miss Nurse, breaking all the instruments, kicking others who are a favorite crew of Miss Ratched, yelling and screaming, and finally goes on to Miss Nurse Ratched and tears her upper part of the garment and holds her throat and tries to suffocate her and kill her. Till eventually good sense prevails and he is pulled back. For that he is being punished. He invites the doomsday, has been subjected to the most dangerous psychotic drug and almost near amputation, lobotomy, L-O-B-O-T-O-M-Y. And when lobotomy is conducted, McMurphy is a chicken, he's a vegetable, he is a dangling man, all his heroism evaporated, he can't walk, he can't talk, he is in a state of daze, and the great hero, the champion of champions, the Magic Johnson, collapses. And it's here that Chief Brompton takes over, and it's now he realizes all that strength and power that he has given me, it's time for me to act, because the chief wants to return to the own life on the Indian Columbia River. He wants to escape. It takes that most heaviest, the most, no man can ever lift those control panels that this man so huge, McMurphy, given him, that you are strong enough like a Hercules, and he takes a heavy panel, steel panels, breaks the glass doors and runs away. One flew over the cuckoo's nest, disappears into the Canadian border, the Columbia River. Disgusted, alienated by an impersonal government, retired from the human race. He goes away, and through the example of McMurphy, he regains his, you know, heroic integrity and returns to life, determined to live out a rebelliousness that McMurphy taught him. And in fact, he has been brought back to the Indian land of freedom, of the American Indian consciousness, individuality, which McMurphy taught him. One weapon rebellion. McMurphy has exaggerated his own consciousness so that others could live. And this is what exactly the novel is talking about. And you know, Bromden refuses to allow Bigness her victory. So he smothers, he kills McMurphy, putting the pillow on his neck, and then escapes to freedom, return to his own life, return to freedom, escape to freedom is what McMurphy talks about. This is one of the greatest novels. I tell you, individual versus the state, authoritarianism versus democratic values of life. The movie I recommend, my friends, to see it because it's one of the greatest pictures, all-time pictures, the greatest picture, and of course, a movie that really, Kirk Douglas, my hero of adolescent years. Kesey, if you're listening, I talked about Kirk Douglas to you so many times, the conversation we used to have. Kirk Douglas is one of the greatest heroes to have hit the silver screen in Hollywood, and he set the silver screen ablaze with his cowboy movies, and of course so many great pictures that he's acted. His son Michael Douglas became one of the more popular heroes in the late 80s, 90s, and 20s, and he has made this film. Mind you, this novel was made into a big Broadway hit, and sensing the success in the Broadway, Michael Douglas made this movie, and one of the greatest pictures. When I first saw it, I couldn't believe it. When I read the novel, I started believing it. When I was teaching the novel, I would take my MA final year student to my house. So many times I showed the movie to my students. Even in SRC, I took a bunch of my final year students and showed them. And Dr. Nageshwar, if you remember, I think you must be one of those students who have attended that screening of that great thing. I tell you, this is a landmark novel. If ever, ever.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
A perfect rose, a perfect flower, full of splendor and perfume. It is novel. Whenever I open this novel, when I don't get sleep late in the night, I open the book, I smell perfume on the pages. It revitalizes. It gives me the extra gutsy feeling, well, we are not too old. You can still get that kind of a sensibility of heroism of a man who portrayed against the counterculture which became so famous. Kesey has used many devices, the comic strip technique, using the mythological good versus the enemy, creating the Superman, the John Wayne syndrome, one of the greatest cowboy heroes of all time, one of my favorite stuff, John Wayne. It's an American fiction, a separate chapter, John Wayne syndrome. Heroism lies with a man who can pick up the gauntlet and take the fight to the enemy camp and beat them at home. Fight on, never give up. That's a slogan Kesey has given, and what great songs have come out of it. Allen Ginsberg, even their guru, Scott Fitzgerald, visited them. He had marijuana with them, LSD with them, and he was like, their guru, like a man who really guided them. And he was a great novelist, and he was like a magical deity, transformed all the youngsters, including Jack Kerouac, another favorite writer of mine, who wrote that famous book, On the Road, Dharma Bums. talks a lot about that, but died very young at 44, snatched away. And let me tell you, Ken Kesey is still alive and kicking. He's still 78, going strong in North Oregon. But after that, he wrote another great novel, sometimes a great notion, but not as popular as his first novel. Then came Over the Border, and the other novel he wrote is Spit in the Ocean. They're all popular novels, but he's still a social activist. The American government is scared of him, where he could really mobilize people and revolutionize them and send them to fight against the state. That is the power that the man has the capacity to wield the authority over everybody. I think now I must say it's the end. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Really, it is very wonderful session, and
Tell me the questions. What the questions?
most of the participants are enlightened by our talk. Now it's open for discussion. Any doubts, clarifications?
Tell me the question. Did anybody ask a question? Tell me the question.
Yes. Any questions, please? Participants are requested. If you have any doubt or clarification, Professor Gopal Rao sir is with us. You can ask him.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. This is
Good
Manjula.
afternoon.
Yeah,
Sir,
Manjula, you can talk now.
yes, sir. I don't have a doubt, but I joined a little late. But I really remembered the days with Professor Gopal Rao, sir, where he taught us Wuthering Heights, and and that class forced me to buy that book. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so happy to listen to you once again, and I am really fan of Professor Gopal Rao, sir. Sir, how are you, sir? I'm one of your students in 2006 batch, where we worked together for a seminar on Sol Bellow. So how are you, sir? I just want to talk to you. And
What the
thank you,
question?
Konda, sir, for
Acha.
introducing our teacher again. I'm so happy, delighted.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Manjula.
Yeah, Wuthering Heights, that one of the greatest novels I ever taught. I really enjoyed, and I must tell you that is one of the greatest classic novel of all time. And let me tell you that she's a standard school dropout and wrote one of the 10 best novels in the world. Wuthering Heights is one of the 10 best novels in the world, written by a second standard school dropout. And what a lovely character, impeccable language, and the immortal character Heathcliff that she created.
Yes,
And Catherine, one of the greatest love stories, that Romancing the Stone is one of the greatest works ever to have etched out, and I think it's timeless, precious, and
yes, sir.
eternally one would be reading and enjoying it.
You brought Heathcliff in
You
the
heard
class,
me.
sir.
You heard me speaking on Wuthering Heights.
Yes, I heard you in
Yeah,
2006, but still I remembered. I think I have read that novel 10 times, sir, and each time I find that novel different and exciting, and I still remember your class. So I'm so excited when Sir Konda sir arranged this webinar. Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you
Sir,
very
I
much.
have a question. Sir, I have a question. So may
Yes,
I
please.
ask?
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please, please.
Okay. Okay. Uh, I'm Dr. Pradipta Mukherjee from the Department of English, Bidyasagar College for Women, University of Calcutta. First of all, I would like to thank Professor B. Gopal Rao for a brilliant and kind of passionate explanation and critical analysis of Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Sir, you talked not just about the book, but you also explained in great detail the film adaptation of the novel. Particularly, the film adaptation that you talked about is Milos Forman's 1975 version of Ken Kesey's novel. Am I right, sir? You talked about Milos Forman's 1975 version of Ken Kesey's novel. And you talked about this actor who plays Mac Murphy, that is Jack Nicholson, the rebellious spirit Mac Murphy, played by Jack Nicholson. And Jack Nicholson is a very talented actor. He's a brilliant actor because, right, in 1975, he plays Mac Murphy in this particular film, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And again, after 5 years in 1980, he plays Jack Torrance, a mentally derailed character in Stanley Kubrick's film The Shining, the psychological horror film The Shining. Again, Jack Nicholson plays a mentally derailed character. So I was really happy when you talked about Jack Nicholson's role as Mac Murphy in the film, and you also mentioned Nurse Ratched, where it is played by this actor Louisa Fletcher, another very talented American actress, and she won the Golden Globe for playing this role in this film, Louis Fletcher. So my question is, since you have already elaborated, but would you like to also tell us that would you consider Jack Nicholson's role as a kind of a persuasive portrait of a preeminently sane man who's being pushed to the outer limits of his sanity by the need to conform to societal rules and regulations? Because you talked about madness as a mechanics of defiance, you talked about laughter as a weapon, okay, as a subversive weapon. So by the end of the film, you have Murphy, who has become the voice for all the muted and silenced souls of the mental asylum, and he delivers to them the power to articulate their own revolt. And there are scenes in the movie that talk of McMurphy's alienation from the outside world and his rebellion against existing power structures. So how do you see Jack Nicholson performing in these particular aspects of the movie? Would you like to comment on that? So it was a brilliant lecture, and thank you so much for delivering this brilliant lecture on Bengali New Year's Day. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I must tell you that Jack Nicholson is a right man who really fits into the bill in the role of a great actor whose films have become great blockbusters. His persuasive character is more important because he's trying to nudge, he's trying to impose himself because they're all chickens, chicken livered punks, he calls them, but they have no guts to fight back. He tries to train them, excite them, teach them, convert them, and effusively give them that extra longing and a desire to come out of their own shell. I think Jack Nicholson went on to win 3 Academy Awards for a stellar role in that role, McMurphy. No other actor could have played that role. Even the director, Milos Forman, said he won the Oscar. Both Jack Nicholson, the director, Milos Forman, Best Picture, and one of the Best Supporting Actor, Best Hero, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. What do you want? Jack Nicholson is a multi-dimensional actor who has the capacity in the role of persuasiveness, that he has the command, he has the influence, he has that rigidity of the tough man image, or the kind of a, the cowboy image of a man who can't stand and take any nonsense. He fits into the role like a glove to the hand and beautifully showed or demonstrated his, acting talent. I think one of the best performances. But he went on to win 2 more Oscars because he's one character. Even if you see the latest movie, A Bucket List, what a fabulous role, along with Morgan Freeman. This is one of the greatest all-time things that he could do it and just do it. Like Ian Morgan does it when he's a captain, a left-hand batsman, striding away the straight drive. That is the perfectionist. The game of cricket, straight drive, and you see acting method. He's a method actor who really infuses confidence in his fellow actors. That's what it is all about.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. A good question. Sir, there are many themes in Cuckoo's Nest like insanity, power, and homosexuality, and mental illness and all. Sir, I have a doubt. Uh, what is the significance of fishing trip? Fishing trip in Cuckoo's Nest. How do you understand the fishing trip?
a real climactic moment because he takes them to the bosom of nature and she is a mother of life and he gives them a rebirth. And the fishing episode is one that alters their consciousness. Each one begins to feel that there is no pain, there is no longer a burden. We are free people. And that, fishing episode gives them the renewal of life, as what in wasteland, in the last stage you find that how water can have the redeeming impact, and it's not death by water, but water is a redeeming source of life. It inspires them, and they come back into the mental warden as refreshed, as the batteries recharged and come back. And then, of course, you have the liquor and the prostitutes. A total mayhem, let lost, and everything is almost that they have defied every authority and they're ready to fight. And now they're reborn, regenerated, excited. Fishing episode is a central thing. Recalcitrance is the badge of courage. Resistance is the badge of courage.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Participants, any doubts, queries? Yeah, I think all doubts are cleared by you, sir. Your lecture never gives any space to the doubts because your lecture goes like that. And you have tried to touch upon various aspects of the classical text of Ken Kesey's One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest. And you made your observations on the text as it embodies in the modern form of long-standing tension in American life and literature between the individual and the society. And also we spoke on optimism and pessimism. And most of the areas, even the students of English literature, when they go through the text, they get many doubts regarding the themes and concerns. You try to touch upon the background studies of American literature, and you spoke on the contemporary relevance of American society and all. Thank you very much, sir. By my phone call, you accepted to give a talk on the wonderful topic. Undoubtedly, all the participants enjoyed your talk, and thank you very much, sir, for sparing your valuable time with us. And I am looking forward. I always feel proud as I was your student in my post graduation, and OUCIP always welcomes you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
The participants are requested to fill the feedback form so that you will be getting the participation certificate of Gopal Rao sir's lecture through email. The link has been provided in the chat box. You are requested to fill the feedback form so that you will be getting the certificate. It will be reaching to you within 2-3 hours today. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.